I want you to picture this. You're about to have a conversation with your partner or your loved one or whoever it is. It might be about money or dishes, something silly, something important. It might be a fight you've been having for 7 years already. And you think that you've regulated yourself and you're walking in open and reasonable and ready to have this conversation. But actually, without you knowing it, both of you have already written the outcome of this conversation. And in the next few minutes of having this conversation, you're going to reenact all of the things that have sabotaged all your relationships in the past and maybe led to divorces and lifelong vendettas, because this is how we do when we're not paying attention. Today, we're talking about assumptions that create conflict in your relationships. What do you think about that, Gigi?
I mean, I think I've done it many times without realizing I was doing it. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I think you're giving us a lot of credit that I think even just what you said of, hey, you're about to discuss something with someone you care about. It's maybe a little tension filled, and you think you're regulated enough to come in and have the conversation. I think even that is a big deal.
Mm.
How many of us actually check in to see if, oh, I think I'm actually regulated enough to come and have a productive conversation before we enter the conversation? And what does that even mean? Do we even know what it means to be regulated enough to try to have a conversation like this? And often I'll say to people, if it would just take like one comment for you to roll your eyes again, it means you're not actually ready. And there's no shame in admitting that. It's actually good for us to know that. To know, hey, I've settled enough that I don't feel like I'm going to come into it screaming and yelling and trying to just slam you down or to be completely shut down. But I know that I'm still tender and sensitive to the point where if you said one thing or you looked at me a certain way, that I'd get just as activated. I'd get reactivated again really quickly. That is something we want to learn and know about ourselves and know moment to moment. Where am I actually? In terms of my readiness to hear some hard to hear things. And it's okay to realize I'm actually not ready. Yeah. So that's my first bit.
Well, so this is such a key. I mean, I remember being in therapy with a partner, and the rule that the therapist told us to follow was
Mhm.
if things get heated, you both take a break, go into separate spaces, and wait to come back until you're ready. Well, I didn't know what the hell that meant. So I just
Yeah.
went off into my separate space and stewed in my own juices and got more irritated and
Mhm.
felt like, okay, I'm not actively going to scream in this moment. But definitely I was, a hair's breadth away from eye rolling and losing my mind if anything was said.
Yes. And so what's interesting is there is a good point in if you feel too activated to have any type of constructive conversation. And by constructive conversation, I mean, are you connected in any way to compassion or curiosity for yourself and the other person? If you can already say, actually, no, I'm not, then you're probably, well, you aren't ready for a constructive conversation. And in that case, it is helpful to do whatever you need to do, often separately, to regulate your system and come back to some sort of settling so that you can connect back to some type of compassionate curiosity for yourself and the other person. The trouble is, most people don't know how to do that.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, but how? And like you said, we might part ways, but then stew because we
Yeah.
don't know what to do with that time. So I've been working with people, and sometimes people have the protective pattern when things get hard to pull away, to withdraw. And I'm not talking about the kind where you go and you take a break and you settle yourself or you find something or someone to co regulate with and you come back and reconvene. I'm talking about just leave altogether and then come back eventually, but pretend like everything's fine.
Right.
That's not constructive, right? So I've been playing around with working with people, like working with couples, and in the moment saying, okay, let's actually, no one's leaving the room because sometimes someone leaving stirs up the old attachment wounds of the other person of, oh, right, I'm wanting connection, I want to resolve, and this person is leaving again. So it's like, what? I wonder what it'd be like to close that option off, that old pattern of just leaving. And what would it be like for these two people to stay in the same room? But I said, go choose opposite corners of the room right now, where you can stare at the wall, you can look away, you're not looking at each other, and you're just having your own moment. And I'm going to walk you through some simple somatic practices to settle your own system. So we walked through a bunch of little exercises, didn't take long. And I asked them, how are you feeling? What do you notice in your body? And we shifted towards, I think they were laying on the ground at some point. I said, can you touch into some compassion for yourself in this moment of you doing your best and you have good intentions for this conversation? And they were both like, yeah, I can. Okay, great. Okay. Now let's try the next thing. Can you connect to something you appreciate about your partner? Right? Something you're hoping to be able to offer them in this conversation. And I said, if you can't, it's okay. I actually want you to be really honest about that, but I just want you to do a little self check in. Can you connect into some of that compassion? And they were both at the point where, like, yes, I can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, in that case, I said, take your time. And when you feel ready, then come back and let's reconvene and let's sit together on this Zoom call.
Right.
And then I had them check in with the difference between where they were at initially when I saw them starting to get activated, but wanting to go with old pattern of let's push through and let's talk about the hard thing that we haven't been talking about, right? Because it's important to talk about the hard thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not helpful to try to talk about the hard thing when neither person is resourced.
Indeed.
Right? So they were amazed at the difference that it makes. Nobody left the building. They were
Yeah.
actually even in the same room, but they both took responsibility of settling their own systems with
Mm-hmm.
some support, some guided support. They both checked in and realized, okay, I have it now, or oh, not quite yet. And then when they had it, they're like, okay, I'm ready to come back now.
Yeah.
And from
Just
that place, we could talk about stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So the regulation piece is the one piece, but you're highlighting something here too about the assumptions that are written differently in different containers. So right off the bat, having a third party professional there changes the floor of assumptions, right? Instead of just, oh, great, I'm in our home space where, I feel like the other person has more power and they could leave at any time. Already we have an assumption set of, okay, we're in this room together for 1 hour with an expert who's going to help us, be kinder to ourselves and each other. So right there, the floor of assumption has shifted in a way that we're maybe conscious of, maybe not so much. But in terms of what assumptions you're introducing there specifically, they're things to do with like compassion and curiosity and reminding us, they're sinking us back into some of those more tender places together that feel nicer to be in. So that's changing the floor of assumptions. Can you talk a little bit about the conscious and unconscious assumptions that we typically bring into, we bring them in everywhere we go.
Yeah.
That's our conditioning. It's our whole jam, but in
Yes.
couples and relationships.
Yeah. So, yes, now let's talk about this layer that often sits in between us and the other person that goes unspoken, right? So, right now, I just talked about the nervous system regulation to just even know I have capacity to be having this conversation. That's one element. There's a few other elements that I always check in with couples before we actually even talk about what the issue is. And this piece about assumptions is one of those pieces. I'll ask the people, what is an assumption, helpful or unhelpful, that you're carrying into this conversation right now? And I'll actually just give them quiet time. I really want to invite you to be as honest as you can with yourself. And actually, in this exercise, they're not even sharing the assumption out loud with each other. I just wanted them to sit with that and recognize, hey, are you assuming you're right and they're wrong? Are you assuming that there's no point in having this conversation anyways because you do this over and over and they don't change at all? Are you assuming this relationship is doomed so, it really doesn't matter what you talk about? Are you assuming that this is one of my go-tos. I assume that people are mad at me.
Mm.
Right? I'm assuming you're mad at me, and now I've got to bring the sweetest part of myself to the table to make sure I don't lose connection with you. So I ask people, just sit for a moment and notice the assumptions you're bringing in, and then notice whether they support a helpful conversation or not.
Mhm.
And that's it. And then after that, we talk about, could you take a moment to make a more positive assumption that feels true, right? Not one that's made up and you're like, I don't believe that at all. Like, what's a more positive assumption or more neutral assumption you could bring in right now? And then I'll actually ask them, what did you notice about that? And that can take us to wild places of discussing, holy crap, I did not realize the types of assumptions I carry.
Mhm.
I did not realize how closed I actually was. I did not realize how defended I actually am. I did not realize how on the attack I'm ready to be. Right. And that's what we actually got to share with they got to share with each other. Wow, I'm taking responsibility for the fact that without bringing awareness to this, I was actually bringing all this energy through these assumptions into this conversation before we said a single word about what the actual issue is,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
There's so much in there about so what our bodies are aware of, which is different than what our minds are aware of, and also what emerges from the saying these things out loud, right? You're talking about assumptions that we're not even aware we have until we do
Mhm.
some exploration other than the normal in our head grinding thing that we normally do. So actual action, feeling your body, saying things out loud and noticing what's true that you just weren't aware of.
Mhm. And so this is an exercise in itself. I would say there is value at some point when you and this other person have grown the muscles to speak truthfully and hear someone's truth without taking it personally or taking it less personally or recognizing, hey, this is about them. When you have grown that muscle or you're being guided by someone, by all means share your assumptions, right? With each other, it can be very powerful, very healing to really own and share your assumptions, take ownership of them. But if you have not grown those skills yet, that's probably not a really helpful thing to blast out these assumptions that you have. Unless you're now regulated enough to talk those through, have some compassion for each other that, wow, we both came in, wielding something or wanting to defend ourselves from something or feeling like I had to pretzel myself in order to save something here.
Mhm.
So, the big stuff is to be able to create time for yourself to do this on your own. Because, like you said, there's certain things we're aware of, we're conscious of, but the things that we're not, like, did I write one down here? One that I was not conscious of. Oh, I have to blast you in order to be heard.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was an assumption I was making. I was just showing up like full of fire and like setting my boundary in this really bold, loud, fierce, non-compassionate way. And
Mhm.
I thought that was me finally learning how to have my power, have my own back, use my voice, set my boundaries because I had been a doormat for so many years. And later, upon reflection, I realized, oh, I'm holding an assumption that for you to hear me and to really care about what I'm saying, I have to be loud and I also have to make you feel horrible.
Right.
Well, that's an unfortunate assumption to carry.
Yeah. And it's a really common one, right?
Mhm.
And it's never sitting on its own. That's an assumption that's always in this complex relationship with a bunch of other assumptions as well, right? So if you're assuming that and you're assuming that, other people are always right or that other people are mad at you, think about the complex tentacles those assumptions are creating in the way that you're communicating with other people.
Yes, when I sit across from someone who I love and I care about and I assume they're mad at me, whatever I say out of my mouth is not the full truth because I'm trying to filter and bend what comes out of my mouth to make it be okay because I'm not comfortable with someone being mad at me.
Right.
And so the truth gets completely distorted.
Mm-hmm.
And so then what's the point of that conversation?
Totally. Yeah, the truth is such a subjective and relational thing at all times. And you said something earlier about that I sort of equate with feeling like you're sparring with your enemy, right? It's so
Yeah.
easy to go into this when you have opposite opinions or different opinions,
Mhm.
assuming that the other party is like evil or bad or wrong for having a different opinion, and
Mhm.
not being genuinely curious about that. There's
Mhm.
especially, the large conversations happening now politically. People assume that someone who doesn't think the way they think, they attribute all of these horrible ideas and opinions to them just off the bat. You hear
Mhm.
one opinion someone has, and you extrapolate it to mean all these other opinions that you think they have. And then there's no
Mhm.
room for dialogue or conversation. And the
Mhm.
assumptions that you're carrying in mean that
Yeah.
there's no conversation to be had. You're
Yeah.
immediately casting everybody else as the enemy.
Mhm. That's an assumption I made before. So I've made the assumption I'm gonna have to defend myself here. And, like, I'm not always actively thinking that, but if I examine my mind before I get into this conversation, and if I were to track what's happening in my mind during, I'm like, "Oh, this has a lot of defensive energy to it."
Mm,
Right? I'm not actually even listening to the other person while they're talking. I'm just
mhm.
sort of tracking, "Oh, they said this, so this is my next comeback," right?
Yeah,
Which automatically tells me I'm making an assumption here that I must defend every point I have, that
yeah,
my case must be airtight. I'm making the assumption that this person's holding no curiosity towards my point of view, has no interest towards it, and doesn't wanna hear it, which is often not actually the case. This person doesn't want to be berated, they don't want to be shamed, but it's not necessarily true that they have no curiosity towards your thought process or what feels important to you.
yeah. Have you heard this term, every accusation is a confession?
Every accusation. Yeah. Oh, I haven't heard it put that way, but I'm like, "Ooh, I feel that."
Ooh, yeah, right?
Mm,
Because we
mhm,
see the world the way we assume that it is.
mhm,
So if I'm saying you're doing this, you're doing that, I mean, anytime I see myself with this finger out like this, I'm gonna quickly turn it around here because
mhm,
there's something additional going on, right? I'm generating a reality outside of my mind, which sometimes is true and sometimes isn't. But to find these things, you said something about energy a second ago, and you coming with this fight energy and this enemy kind of battle
mhm,
energy. So much of that is informative, right? And if you can pause to feel your body, you might not be able to locate your conscious and unconscious assumptions, but if you can feel the energy of something is amiss in your body, if you're heightened in some way, that's the only information you need, which is why we're slowing people down and getting them connected to their body. And in our somatic sessions, it's all about slowing down and noticing the information your body's giving you because it's
mhm.
telling you a lot more than your mind is able to.
Mhm. Right, and that's why even as you're listening to us, have a notice. Are you tight somewhere? Do you feel relaxed? Right? And that's a practice you wanna bring into everyday life because if you're tight somewhere, if you're bracing somewhere right now, good to know, but this is probably energy that makes it difficult for you to have compassion for yourself and curiosity towards yourself and the other person. And it doesn't mean you're never going to be able to discuss hard things, right? I work with people too who they think, well, gosh, we get so triggered by each other. Are we ever going to be able to talk about the hard things that we have to talk about? Like, yes, absolutely, you are. But you've been misinformed or uninformed, like all of us, most of us, that there's actually some basic foundational muscles and skills you have to grow in order to be able to talk about hard stuff. If we tighten up every time the person says their opinion or what would feel better for them, or they're making a request, like, could you do it this way next time? And we already take that to, oh my gosh, I'm bad and wrong and they hate me. They're going to leave me. How will we ever talk about the hard stuff?
Mhm.
Right. So we have to grow the muscle to be with some of that discomfort along the way. We need to grow the muscle to have the awareness that something in me doesn't feel very open or fully open right now. And that's how you know there's some assumptions at play,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
One of the really obvious to me assumptions, so I've always had this ability to, uh, I can almost actually physically see misunderstandings, and
Mhm.
it drives me bonkers because I'm like, "Oh, you mean this and you mean that, and you're not understanding each other." The
Mhm.
meanings of words is a really good place to start, right? So if you're
Mhm.
having some kind of consternation interpersonally and something's getting missed and you're not understanding each other, that's a great opportunity to slow down and find out what you mean when you say X, Y, and Z. What
Yes.
meaning do they make of these words? What are triggering words like outside of this conversation? The context in the conversation might not be triggering, but maybe there's a smell in the room that's reminding them of their great aunt Gemma who died and they're sad about it, and that's bringing an energy, like an unconscious vibe to the conversation. There's
Yeah,
so many
this one makes
layers.
me laugh. He makes me laugh listening to you because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, okay, yes, guilty, me." And, like, it's fine, it's a human thing, but what came to mind was, in my own relationship, we've had to do this because 'cause I'm like, "Why are we having the same conversation again? Like, I thought we talked about this." And it's easy when you think that to just wanna blast the other person or think your relationship is doomed or whatever. But it's often I like to see it as, "Hey, the engine light is on in the car." It's just telling you, "Hey, you gotta take care of something. You gotta get curious, like, what's under the hood? What's going on?" And when I'm curious about it, I'm like I get really granular. I'm like, "Okay, we both have said this sentence before, like, you have told me this. So what are you actually meaning, and what did I think that mean?" Right? And, like, for example, we're talking about, my partner says he's gonna take the lead on something, some area of our life. And we've sort of circled around this topic a couple times now, and I'm like, I wonder why it's not going the way I had imagined it's gonna go, and I'm starting to feel frustrated. And one day we're on a walk, I'm like, actually, what does that mean to you, the word lead? And we have the same thing with what does important to you mean?
Mm,
Right? Because I'm like, when I use that term, it's important to me, then I think of what's the next action that I need to do to sort of move us in that direction. But like when you think important, are you just like, yes, it's important to me? And then you're like, that's it.
yeah.
Right? Which then all of a sudden that word means something different to the two of us. I'm pairing it with like
Mhm.
some consistent action and you're meaning it as it's something that's important to me. I value it, period.
Yeah, that's a huge one, especially these ones that lead to, in our minds, action or something is required of us. So I've noticed this one for sure in my family. If someone's talking about an idea, it's not just casual talk. It's we're going with this quickly and fast and full on. So if you start just talking to me about ideas, I'm like, oh, God, like I don't have the time or energy to listen to this because I assume that I'm going to be required to do a bunch of things. And to discover that's not the case and be able to just flow with ideas is also a really nice vibe that I just didn't even know existed until, it was in my face.
Yeah, and I think in you and I working together, I like to be like, "Oh, what about this? And what about that? And maybe this," right? And to me, that's like this brainstorming, and brainstorming means it's just like stoking the fire a little bit. Like it might not be the thing we ever actually do or ever think about again, in terms of creativity. It just means, "Oh, guess what? That popped in my head."
Mm,
And for you, you're like, "Oh, sharing ideas means here's the idea, and now we got to execute."
right.
Right? But when it comes to practicalities in my life, when I talk about, "Oh, this is important to me," I do wanna pair that with action. I don't wanna just be like, "Oh, this is important," and then we'll see if it turns out.
Yeah.
And other people are more like that. They're like, "Oh, it's important to me. I don't know. Yeah, don't misunderstand me. It's really important to me." I'm like, "Okay, but if it is, like, why isn't anything happening?" "Oh, but we didn't really talk about that part." Like,
Right.
"Oh, okay." So, that's why, when we're in conscious relationship training, we do something like dyad work, which is using prompts to share often. And what I like about prompts is you're only speaking one sentence at a time. And the way we guide people is not only that they're speaking one sentence at a time, but we're also asking you to practice pausing after that sentence and feeling how your body responds to what you just said. Or on the listening side, just feeling your butt on the chair and like noticing what comes up for you hearing that one sentence. right? Now, if you the reason why we do that is to, well, for many reasons, but one is to pace the nervous system and to address anything that comes up and address any protective patterns that are starting to show up when we listen or when we talk. And so when you slow things down, you have the opportunity to get clear on what did that sentence actually mean? What were you saying? Right? But if you're saying like 7 sentences at a time and it's all very heated and charged and the other person's feeling flooded and activated and they're not even hearing you, they're hearing 3 words of that whole 7-sentence thing and they've given that three words a totally different meaning. And then you carry on to the next 15 sentences. Like, what exactly are we talking about? We
So
don't
much
even know
gets
anymore,
lost. And so much
right?
gets made up. Yeah.
And what's interesting, and I've noticed this a lot for when we use a work scenario, when I'll ask couples, okay, when you're at work and you have a meeting, like the best run companies, what do they do? You just randomly talk about stuff and then everyone packs it in at the end and then see you later. And then you come back at your next meeting and you start from scratch. And everyone laughs like, no, the
Mhm.
best run companies, they document what was said. They note down action points. They note down who's going to do what. And they note down when they're going to check in with each other. And they come back next week or whenever, an agreed upon time, and they check in on the status. Like, why are we not doing that in our personal relationships? Why
Mhm.
are we just blabbering at each other, having no end consensus on who's doing what are we really saying, and like what's the follow-up and when is the follow-up?
Yeah. And a really important point in the work example is that we all also start out with job descriptions. So we know
Yeah.
exactly what's expected of us and each other. Nobody's making up roles for, what does wife mean? What are the expectations of wife? And that's going to be also a very layered example. You said
Mhm.
protective patterns. We're slowing down some of our protective patterns and noticing them. A real key protective pattern is your mind jabbering on and on. So one of the things we notice in dyads when you're doing the work of sitting and listening and not responding, your brain is just going 100 miles a minute. And that is a regular protective pattern that we're also running. We're constantly trying to make things make sense. So when our partner comes to us with a word, we don't just have our conscious and our unconscious assumptions about this word or situation. Our
Mhm.
meaning maker is also making meaning of every single thing that we can't even necessarily see in front of us right now. And that, like
Mhm.
the load of assumptions we start with, is exponential by the time we're actually actively in a conflict.
Yeah, like it happens so fast. And we're wanting to practice slowing it down. Like when we are guiding and facilitating these dyad conversations, you'll see me going like this or like this, telling if you're watching us, I'm making big hand gestures that are basically saying stop talking. And we've created, built relationships with the people we're working with. So there's a level of safety and trust there. So people don't feel like we're like slamming them or like telling them to shut up. But we're like, "Hey, it's time to put the period at the end of the sentence, like, right now, not 3 sentences from now, but right now." And a lot of us don't know when to end the first sentence. And we've piled on so much, the other person can't track it anymore. And then the piece they can track, they react to, and then we react to that, and it's just a big mess,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
So, slow it
expressing
down.
ourselves, slow down. Yeah, communicating and self-expression are not always the same thing, right? So part of us is communicating, so we want the other person to know how we feel, which might be 75 sentences long. But if this is a dialogue where we need to actually be tracking each other and communicating with each other, as opposed to just communicating our feelings and needs, we have to slow that down.
Mhm. Right, and I remember, some people might be familiar with imago dialogue, right? Which is where, they have a more structured framework where you're saying a bit at a time, And even then, I feel that the bit is too long often, right? And one person says something, but what I really love about what they built into the Imago dialogue is the next person takes it in, the person listening, but then their task is to check in and see if they understood correctly. So the prompt is often, hey, if I understood you correctly, this is what you're saying.
Mm.
And then the other person takes a moment and says, okay, like, yes, you got that part. And also, what I was really meaning was this, or, oh, you missed this part. And if you've ever lived a life where you don't like being told what to do, this kind of framework can make you want to say, screw this is dumb. Why would we talk this way? But it's because we don't have the skill set of being able to really understand what the other person is saying yet. Like, as you know each other better, I would say that muscle grows. But even then, I think we make wrong assumptions often, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we would just, one, slow things down, if we would get clear with ourselves about what our intention is of the conversation, if we would get clear with ourselves of what are the assumptions I'm bringing in, and then be committed to really tracking, am I understanding what this person is wanting me to understand?
Mm-hmm. This is a serious key here. Actual willingness to understand and an actual propensity to seek understanding. If your goal and intention of a conversation is strictly to understand what the other person is saying, that's really different than, and especially in romantic partnerships where there's so
Mhm,
much layered in there with our attachment stuff. And we want them to hold our feelings and we unconsciously want them to be responsible for our feelings and make us feel better. It's too complicated. That willingness piece has to be super highlighted and it has to be like you have to put down your desire
mhm,
to be understood yourself and to be
mhm.
held in your own emotions. You have to be able to hold your emotions enough
Yeah,
for yourself, but that's not the primary goal of your interaction with this person. And if you can shift
mhm,
that to wanting to really understand what they mean, I think there's so much of us unconsciously pretending that we want to understand what the other person is saying. And we say,
mm.
I'm willing, I'm listening, I'm just curious. Like, ooh, don't get the feeling of curiosity and, you know,
No.
yeah, there's so much
Yes.
of that. And we just use the words. And again, that's because we don't have time or space and we have not been taught how to be with the feelings.
Yes. 2 things about that that I find helpful, because it is a very fine line between I'm curious and I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Like, it gets to that point really quickly, very easily,
Yeah.
right? When someone says a tiny thing or has a look or, like, positions their body a certain way, it can already activate us enough to, like, switch sides, and we're in the, "Yes, I'm curious, I just wanted to know." Well, so what helps me, I find, and this is because it works for me and my partner, is some type of physical touch, and I know that you've talked about that as well, right? I'm like, if I put my hand somewhere on him, it helps me remember he's not the enemy. We're in this together. I do want to understand. So that physical touch is an anchor. It's like an actual physical anchor that reminds me I am curious, right? My nervous system might jump into, I'm curious. But the hand there reminds me, like, no, I actually am curious. I really do like this person. I do want to know what's going on for them, and vice versa, right? When I feel the touch, I'm reminded, like, okay, this person does care. Maybe they're like clumsy with their words right now. Maybe they don't know what to say and how to handle this thing that's going on for them, hearing me say whatever I'm saying. But like, we're on the same side. So find what those things are for you that anchor you back to that genuine curiosity, that genuine love and like for each other. Right? Because I'm hoping if you have no genuine like or love for each other, like, why are you even conversing?
Well,
Right?
now, I have some comments on that. So I think you have, from what I understand, you've always been a pretty healthy relationship sort of a person, whereas I have been more of a desperate attachment need person. So
No, I fooled you, Stephanie.
you did, you fooled me. Well done.
I'm very
I
good
don't,
at fooling.
in therapy sessions, it's
Mhm.
normal for a couples therapist to start by reminding you that you love each other, right? Or asking, confirming, do you in fact love each other? Do you in fact want to be together? And
Mhm.
that can be a moment of pause, which, by the way, you can all introduce for yourselves anytime. G's very good at remembering that sort of thing. If that's a grounded thing, oh yeah, thanks for slowing me down and reminding me that I actually do love this person and want to be with them. In the
Mhm.
past, when I've been asked that question, it was like, well, of course I of course I want to be with him. I wouldn't be here otherwise. And in hindsight, this was not a suitable match. It was not a good feeling. It was not what I now know an embodied sense of, yes, I love and respect and want to be with this person. That is not what I was doing before. It was like, do you like me? I think you're hot. I want to be with you. Like, that's not the vibe, but I didn't know the difference, you know?
Mhm.
So when
Mhm.
asked that question, it didn't have the same grounding, self-remembering, curious
Mhm.
making effect. It was just sort
Right.
of another annoying thing in the way of me feeling better.
Right. And I think to have that level of self-awareness, whether it's in the moment or in hindsight, is important, right? And then we look at other things. Well, say that's not the entry point. Do you want to come to some resolution with this person? Do you want something more easeful with this person? Or are you actually just wanting to pay someone money to listen to you attack someone? That's fine too, but let's just be honest about it, right? If you're like, I'm actually here so that I can pay you this much money so that you can sit and listen to me yell at my partner, then let's just say that out loud that
Yeah.
that's what you're
Well, I
doing.
think it's probably often bless whoever is conscious enough to know that that's what they desire. But I think there's so much fixing that happens, right? I was in that space in the instance I'm thinking of to try to have the counselor fix my partner. And you know what? It
Mhm.
was seeing family counselors as a child. It was like, I need you to explain to my parents what they're not understanding. So there was no
Mhm.
like bi-directional curiosity. It's one party trying to change the other or, unconsciously manipulate the other person into helping them feel better. It's kind of at the root
Mhm,
of all of
mhm,
this.
mhm. And I think that as we grow and we learn, like, that's what we wanna own. It's fine if you're going to a counselor wanting them to teach your partner a lesson and fix them. But, like, the more you can come in and say, "That's what I'm wanting." Like, the parents that you used to come to me and say, "I want you to fix my child," I'm like, "Excellent." Because now you're clear with me. You're clear with me,
Mhm.
you're honest with me about where we're starting from, we're starting from there. I'm gonna meet you at that place. And then we're gonna go along, and then one day you're gonna have a holy crap moment. And they all did. They were like, "Holy crap, you mean this is about me?" Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
And you're welcome.
yeah.
Right? But like the more honest, this just comes back to the more honest I can be with myself,
Mhm.
right? The further things can start moving towards a better direction. Even if I'm realizing that being honest with myself is admitting that I just want to be self-righteous and right.
Right. That's you're highlighting even what the topic is, hidden and obvious assumptions. So in that
Mhm.
case, a parent might unconsciously want you to fix them, and then that's an assumption you have to tease out of them. But if they're conscious of it and they can just say it out loud, that makes everything easier. This is true
Yeah.
for all the assumptions, conscious and unconscious, that we're talking about here today.
Yeah. So we're basically saying you are worth getting to know. Get to know yourself. And it's really hard to get to know yourself when you're really hard on yourself. So it's also important to have people in your world who help you practice growing that self compassion muscle and that self acceptance muscle because it's the combination of those two things that allows the self discovery to happen.
Mhm.
And then from that self-discovery place, you're like, "Oh, this is the assumption I'm bringing in. Oh, that part of it is helpful, that part of it's not." Now, like, we're working with something tangible and workable here,
Yeah.
right?
And so this is also one of those, as within, so without sort of things. The more curious you get about yourself and your own process, and the more active you become about that curiosity, you're doing something about it, the more you're going to get curious about the people around you as well. So when you start noticing your own reactivity and going, oh, what's in there? Instead of getting reactive when you see somebody else getting reactive, you go, ooh, I wonder what's happening in there.
Yes, right? When I couldn't see like, I used to There were two people that I would lay a lot of blame on. I think one was my mom and one was one of my exes. We were like in relationship at the time. But the easy thing to blame them both for, and I wouldn't do this to their face, I would do it like in my own, bedroom, pissed and resentful, was, oh, they're so avoidant. They won't just have the conversation. And I was on my little self-righteous, pedestal, being like, hey, here I am wanting to work things out, wanting to talk things out. And like, they just can't go to that place, which, yes, there's an element of truth to that. That factually was what was going on. And also, I'm like, oh, when do I do that as well? And then when do I do that as well with these people?
How am I doing it right now by stewing in my bedroom thinking about it instead of talking to them about it?
Yes, right? And so the more you get to know yourself with a level of sort of humility and humor and acceptance, like the easier your relationships get.
Yeah.
And I remember, one thing I really desire in partnership is that someone can be open with me. I want to go beyond the surface level. I want depth and I want intimacy. And I haven't really chosen people. The majority of people I've chosen haven't had an easy time opening it up for whatever reasons that they have had, right? And I remember one day recently with my partner, we were talking about something and he volunteered some information. And I can't even remember exactly what it was, but there was something about it that my reactive part wanted to latch onto and sort of just nitpick about or just focus not super helpful energy on. And then I just noticed in my body, I'm like, that feels sort of yucky. Like something's feeling sort of yucky about this right now. Why? What's happening? And I sat with it and I thought, I wonder if that was a really hard thing for him to share. Like given what I know about him and given I'm like, that's sort of volunteering some information that I haven't really heard that level of information before. And I think somehow we went back and I don't know exactly what happened, how it all transpired, but I think I asked, like, was that actually a really hard thing for you to share with me? Right. And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh. So one of the assumptions that I can see in hindsight that I'm running sometimes is when people are sharing with me, when my partner is sharing with me, it's sharing with me from a place of ease. And so I can just take what they're saying and then just drill in.
Yeah.
And I'm not realizing that sometimes the things people say to you are because they've mustered up a lot of courage to finally say something to you that's actually very scary for them to say. And, they haven't grown that muscle to be able to preface that with, hey, this is really hard for me to say, but it's important that it's the one I'm sharing it. Like if he would have said that to me, I think I would have responded differently. But we're not always aware of these things happening. We don't always have those skills built in yet. Yeah. So I didn't track that. And only in hindsight, when I felt something yucky in my body, that I get curious. I'm like, oh, I think something happened there. I think he was sharing something vulnerable and I didn't catch that. And I decided to drill in on some piece that was annoying me. And then it caused him to sort of just shut down.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Also, this is saying something like to understand is to love. If we knew the inner workings, we would have so much more compassion and curiosity for the other people. But unless it occurs to us to slow down and say something like, this is really hard for me to say, the other person won't be cued for it, right? But you will have a set of starting assumptions that you're unconscious of that will generate that curiosity. Like when a child falls and scrapes their knee and they're crying, you understand why they're crying. You understand what that pain is like. You have immediate access to that compassionate, comforting thing. But in other cases where someone's crying, you might not, right? Because it's unconsciously setting up all these other internal assumptions in your conditioning that cut you off from compassionate curiosity.
Yeah. This is a really important key point you're making. And it reminds me of a lesson I learned one day. Did you ever do Landmark?
No.
I did Landmark. Anyways, this one moment of Landmark, and it was amazing, but it wasn't even a landmark teaching. It was just some person at this, personal growth convention coming up on the mic, and he was sharing his reflections. And he says, I've been really touched by the people who come up here and share from such a deep, vulnerable place. I notice that when I hear people sharing from their vulnerable place, all of a sudden I can tap into my compassion, and I almost just view them through a totally different lens. And he said that made me realize that every person in this room has their own vulnerable story and their own vulnerable moments and tender times and things they're insecure about. And just because they're not ready or practiced in sharing that doesn't mean they don't hold that pain, or it doesn't mean they don't hold the desire to be really seen and understood. He's like, so I decided that I'm going to extend the same amount of curiosity and openness to people, even when they haven't led with their vulnerability first. It's like, huh.
Good idea.
Good idea, right? And this is like something when I was working a lot with parents that we would talk about is, can we assume good intentions? Right? We're talking about assumptions today. Like, let's assume good intentions in the people that we care about.
In the people that we care about. Yeah. Some discernment here, because I think I defaulted to that so heavily that it got me in trouble and then caused me to have to be boundaried and wretched. So discernment, the people that we care about. This doesn't mean everyone has good intentions all the time and that we should always, completely give of ourselves in that direction. But the people that we care about, that we're in relationship with, which is really what we're talking about.
Yes. And like, again, this is all about discernment and moment to moment, because even the people we care about that we love deeply don't actually always have good intentions, right? Like that can also be true. But like, what if we just assume they did and also stayed tracking things moment to moment in our body to notice things that feel good and don't feel right, and feel like they're rubbing up and crossing our boundaries, and then be honest about that. Like if we can, it's not just let's go walking around the world like assuming good intentions in everybody. Like that's very dangerous. Like we want to assume good intention, and we want to pay attention to reality. Like what are the signs showing us in real time? We want to pay attention to our bodies of like, does a boundary need to be set here? And then we need to assert those boundaries. But like when you piece them all together, it works. But if you're just like, I'm just going to walk around with good intentions for people, yeah, probably not a great idea if that's the only piece you use.
Right.
And it reminds me, so we're complex and complicated and simple at the same time, human beings, because I can definitely tell you the types of conversations where I am listening from the perspective of like, I've forgotten that my partner has good intentions. Right? That part has drifted away. And I'm like, oh, right. Like this would be good time to bring that back in, the reminder back in. And I've also been in conversations where I am so desperate to keep the connection with this person who I love that I'm just going to assume they have good intentions, even when they're being really disrespectful.
Yeah.
And like, that's not the same.
Not the vibe either.
Right? That's when you're like, okay, I'm going to assume that he or she or they have intentions to be a good, decent human being. And it's not working right now. It's not happening. That's not actually the behavior I'm experiencing. And I'm going to have to handle that. Right? So it's about tracking your own patterns and noticing what's happening right now. In this moment, are you dismissing yourself and just trying to rely on, oh, this person is well-intended? Or are you like blanket already making this person wrong and forgetting that they might have good intentions?
And so when I hear you say all of this, it sounds like so much mental work to be doing in any given moment that I want to reiterate that's not where it is.
No.
Your body has this information in nanoseconds without thinking. Which is the whole point, right? It's the thinking that gets us into trouble here. It's the noticing and the emergence that we want to slow down.
Yes.
Feel into.
Yes. So if you're trying to operate this and listen to everything we've said and execute it in real time by thinking your way through all these things we're talking about, you're going to lose your mind, and it's not going to be effective because you're going to be completely out of your body, not in real time. you want to practice the things Steph's talking about, is like slowing down, tracking what's happening in your body. And I think it needs to be paired with this, which is something we walk people through a lot, and we do it in our own lives, which is practice in times where it doesn't matter and it doesn't count and it's not as emotionally intense. Like, I honestly had a practice where I would write down 3 sentences or say 3 sentences. Like, I can see that my partner has good intentions. An example of that is when. Do that 3 times. And what that does is it strengthens your muscle to look for people's good intentions and to be reminded, like, oh, they actually have good intentions. If your muscle in looking for people with good intentions is not strong, how the heck are you going to access that in real time when there's conflict? You're not going to, right?
Yeah.
So just being in your body is not sufficient. Just thinking about these things in times where it doesn't really matter, also not sufficient. Like, it is important. Like, we're talking about actually very simple practices that you can do every day in honestly less than 2 minutes. But they have a very high return. And along with having a high return, there's also a high cost to not doing them.
Yes. Yeah. With downstream effects that we cannot anticipate. And then that becomes your life. So, okay, I'm aware of time and there's a couple of people watching. So I'll just invite you guys, if you have any questions for us, feel free to put those in the chat. But for now, I wonder if you will walk us through a body-based practice that highlights this topic. So conscious and unconscious assumptions that are leading to conflict or that keep us out of that curiosity space with people. How would you highlight that?
Okay. Let's go with this. This is a little self-honesty, right? We're using the prompt, an unhelpful assumption I bring into conversations is, right? Or an unhelpful assumption I bring into relationship is. I'm just going to laugh at mine. It's like, so me. What, do you have one?
Yeah, an unconscious assumption I bring into relationships is that other people know more and better than I do.
And just feel that for a moment. Right. And let's go with a more helpful assumption I want to lean into is.
A more helpful assumption I want to lean into is that may or may not be true.
Yeah. And notice how that feels. What did you notice about saying each one and noticing how they feel?
The first one, I get foolish, childish feelings, which feels unhelpful. Is certainly a true
Unhelpful in adult relationship.
Yeah, like victim mindset-y, like there's not really anywhere to go. It's a helplessness. And the second one just feels roomy and truer.
Yeah. Who doesn't want roomy and truer? Right. And literally, I think, like, I'm watching the clock. I'm pretty sure with confidence, actually, that took less than 2 minutes.
Oh, yes, definitely. What was yours?
Right. Mine is an unhelpful assumption I bring into relationship is you're always going to be mad at me.
Right.
Right. And that's like, you can feel it. That's that sad kid that's like, oh, I did it again. I did it again. That thing that makes you mad at me. Right. And like, it creates, like, my body wants to collapse. Like, I feel it in my gut. And I'm like, oh, just this defeated feeling. And this, oh, I disappointed you again feeling. Right. That makes me want to sort of like, how can I tiptoe out of here and just leave without being noticed? Like, sweet us, and also really not helpful in relationship. Right. And so a more helpful assumption, and I can feel myself a little bit like, going like this now. So if you're watching, I'm like wiggling and sort of straightening my spine. A more helpful assumption is sometimes I will make people mad. And
Mm.
often I'm not making people mad. Often things are fine,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, "Oh, okay then. Carry on."
Yeah. And then, yeah,
It's
totally
quite
different.
boring, like this
Yeah.
is the if anything, if any downfall of this work is it's boring, right? So you're going to need your dopamine from something else
Even
because you're
healthier.
like, "Oh, okay then. Well, I
Yeah,
guess
done
that's
yet.
done."
Right? Yeah, there's no stewing for me to do here. I just have to either, do something or get on with my life. It's wonderfully productively boring. It's true.
And this is how a sneaky way of us not actually living our lives,
Yeah.
because when you have lots to stew about, there's no opportunity. You don't have to go live your life
Mhm.
because there's so many things to be upset about. I remember one time when my partner apologized for something that I said didn't feel good, hurt my feelings. He's like, "Oh yeah, like I can see how that was not helpful. I'm really sorry about that. And like next time I'll pay attention to this XYZ." I was like, "Oh, okay. That's it?"
Yeah. Yeah, where's the fight? Yeah. Well, and
So,
that's a
yeah.
funny one because you're open to that, right? You're present, you're there, you can actually hear that. There are moments when we're so heightened that we would actually hear him saying, "Oh, I hear you. I don't want to make you feel bad." Our
And
ears would
boom.
actually hear him saying, "You don't
Come
love
on, you
me."
got it
Yes.
again? Yeah. You
Yeah,
got some more?
it's wild.
Yes, so I'm saying this because my ears finally got cleared out that I actually hear an apology now.
Yeah.
And, like, I know that sounds silly, but, like, how many times have someone finally offered the apology that you've been, like, really, really wanting, but the second they say they're sorry, then you just pile on some more, and I still catch myself with that, right? It's such
Mm,
an old protective pattern of, "But are you really?" Right?
mm,
And I'm having to practice learning, no, they are. Like they actually are.
yeah,
It doesn't mean that they've grown and fully grown the muscle to do the thing better yet next time. But like this person genuinely cares and they care that they impacted you that way. Let that part land first.
yeah.
And
And
then whatever frustrations I have about, hey, it's still not quite working out in the way that I would like it, can I give the person grace to be growing their muscle in that area?
yeah,
Right? Or can we be clearer with each other about what's a reasonable expectation in terms of seeing a shift in that place?
yeah. So we're letting our assumptions shift and grow in more loving ways as we're more compassionate with ourselves. It's a big
I'm going to
deal.
start assuming that when someone says they're sorry, that they actually are.
Mm, that's lovely. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Gigi.
Mhm.
So, yeah, the one thing to take away from this is that we're all carrying assumptions with us consciously and unconsciously all the time. And that those affect our self beliefs and our beliefs about each other and the actions we take and can be with in relationship. So, anything else pressing you want to say about this?
I think just give yourself time to get curious about your assumptions,
Mhm.
get to know which ones feel helpful to you and which ones don't actually feel helpful, and just let that be okay. Just having it in your awareness is starting
Mhm.
to shift a lot.
Yeah. And if you want to practice more of this body stuff, this is what we do twice a month in our live somatic integration sessions. That's all body stuff. And then twice a year, we run these in depth conscious relationship trainings, 10-week sessions where you get to practice this with activation, with actual people and our guidance, and all the somatic tools that we use to support your body during that. So feel free to comment below any questions that you might have about this. We're happy to answer. We answer all the comments ourselves. And as always, please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.